At first glance, the flight from Bridlington to Flamborough via Sewerby looks quite straightforward. However, if you look carefully at the map, you'll see that a wind what's square on at takeoff will be well off by the time you get to Flamborough. In fact, because of the effect of the cliffs etc., the wind directions are more likely to be those as shown above. The difficult transition of south landing can be well imagined. The flight from Bridlington takeoff to Sewerby Steps you've already seen on the previous video. Here is a view taken from Sewerby Steps looking towards Flamborough. The headland in the distance is South Landing. Flamborough itself is out of view. With this height and that kind of view, it would be tempting to make the trip. But beware, you can tell from the pilot's attitude that there's some easterly in it already. It is facing out over the bay, so the wind is pretty strong. And also, we're just short of high tide, and it's a long way there and back. There are very few places where you could land. In actual fact, there's only 2 spots back up from the beach onto the cliff top, and that's at Danesdyke and South Landing, and neither has a beach at high tide. Now let's have a look at some ideal wind conditions. The example above, an onshore breeze is just setting in about 12 o'clock, and by 1600 hours it's blowing a steady 12 to 15 knots south-southeast. Now that's a perfect direction, very little easterly in it. It will mean, however, an hellishly fast downwind run from takeoff to Sewerby Steps. Note from this clip the state of the tide. The beach is drying out, which shows us that the tide is still falling. Perfectly safe then to venture beyond the steps. To have any chance of reaching Flamborough, you need a minimum of 80 foot above takeoff at Sewerby Steps. Any less than this and you won't make it as far as Danesdyke even. The key is to work the cliffs just before the steps until you've got sufficient height, and then make a tentative run past the steps to see how much easterly there is in the wind. On a sunny day the beach will be booming, with strong thermals kicking off the dark seaweed. Just take note before you set off, there are no safe top landings, and as this view looking back from Danesdyke shows, the beach is a mixture of pebbles and slimy, slippery seaweed. There is very few patches of sand. You'll probably sneak into Danesdyke at clifftop height, as the pilot below in this video has, so hang around there and gain as much height as you can before setting off on the next leg to South Landing. The leg up to South Landing can be pretty difficult, as the bay is turning more and more out of the wind. If you arrive at South Landing and the tide conditions are like this, you'd be a fool to try and go any further. There is just no beach at all once you get round the headland. This is a good time as any to introduce a character you will come across in many of the future videos. It's Mr. Dangerous, who luckily is only dangerous to himself. Mr. Dangerous could teach us all a lesson. Mr. Dangerous arrived at this spot with the same tide conditions on a cold February day, late afternoon, and this is where he landed. But of course, you're much more sensible than him. You're going to arrive when conditions are like this. Occasionally you can make the straight transit across to point A. Very rarely. Just remember that the point of no return is about a third of the way across. Beyond that, you will not make it back to the main cliffs. The more usual route is that shown by line B. The seagulls normally take this route, and I think they know what they're doing. You can continue to gain lift right into the far corner, but that short leg round the headland is a nightmare, as you'll probably see in the next clip. Before we look at this next clip, let's look again at what we could expect to be the normal wind direction. You need about 200 foot above takeoff to attempt the transition, And the transition onto the back cliff can usually be done without any appreciable loss of height. Problems occur when you're trying round the headland. The descent rate is horrendous. Should you need to bail out at this point, you've two options. Option A, which is the safest, is to dump it on the cliff top. Option B is not to be recommended. You'll be landing on the beach in the lee of the headland. Get your legs down early. Whatever you do, you've got to make your mind up quick, otherwise you end up with the Mr. Dangerous option. That's hanging over the cliff edge, with your wing caught in the brambles. Let's now go back to rounding the headland. As I said before, the sink rate is horrendous, and your body is soon being buffeted by the rough air in the rotor on the lee of the cliff. The trick though is to try and keep your wing flying in clean air. If you don't make it, at least you should be landing facing to wind. But just take note of the ground conditions you'll be landing on. If you walk back across the bay and climb the steps up the side of the lifeboat station, there's a possible take-off point in the field above. So you've made it past South Landing and you're heading towards Flamborough. The next question is, how far should you go? Well, you certainly don't go as far as the lighthouse, that's for sure. Because if you do, you'll find yourself flying downwind, and there's a lot of sea between Flamborough and the Netherlands. Towards the end of the headland there are a couple of 90-degree indents. You should be turning at the first one, and certainly not go beyond the second indent. If you do, you'll end up like this chap did a few years ago, landing behind the rock. Let's leave that kind of excitement for the Mr. Dangerouses of this world. The wind can pick up pretty quick at Flamborough. Look at the speed of this downwind leg. So it's best to make your way the bridge side of South Landing. Conversely, the onshore breeze can switch off, or even turn offshore, as in this clip. In what appeared to be perfect conditions, I was soon a couple of 100 foot above the bay. And then, in less than 5 minutes, this happened.
Well, where's the lift gone? Nothing there at all.
In the short time I'd been in the air, the wind had swung round 180 degrees and was now the prevailing offshore breeze. And yes, that is me, not Mr. Dangerous. Downwind landing at this speed would have been a leg breaker, so I had no option but to dump it in the shallow water. So if this video has been of use to you, watch out for my next posting, which covers Brid Bay, beginning with Filey itself. Keep safe, everybody.